Panthers offseason has been here for about over a week now. And on today's episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we're going to talk about some end of season superlatives for the Cats. And we're also going to preview both conference finals in the East and West, all on today's episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, June 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, with your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from PantherParkway.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at Monoman12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On NHL and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark. They'll be covering all the postseason activities around the National Hockey League. So I think that this is, after being off for a few days now, I hope everybody had a great Memorial Day weekend. Sorry I couldn't get an episode out over the weekend. I was traveling a little bit, and it was a little hard to do a show. But here we are. We're back and covering still this offseason and talking about still breaking down what was for the Florida Panthers, even though they still fell short of getting to their ultimate goal of getting swept in the second round by the cross-state rival Tampa Bay Lightning. In today's show, we're going to preview the conference finals, but in the first two segments, we're going to be talking about some end-of-season superlatives for the Panthers this season. And you know what that means? It's a Wednesday, which means Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And let me bring in my Wednesday guest here on the show, Jacob Winans. Jacob, welcome back to the show, man.
Hey, man. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's funny because you were talking about last how the Michael Scott quote, feeling dead inside, and then you come on the show this week wearing the Dunder Mifflin hat that you have on. So was this by design?
No, actually, just kind of by coincidence, but yeah, that show is awesome. Shout out to my girlfriend for getting me the Dunder Mifflin hat. It's a birthday gift last week, so I had to wear it.
I'm not really a big Office great show in the few episodes that I've seen. That I really one was when Dwight set the building on fire and was trying to put the escape methods, the emergency methods, and Michael Scott is like, everybody, so he's like freaking out. So that was one of my favorite scenes that I've ever watched from The Office. So definitely gotta binge that show from start to finish for sure. I haven't had that opportunity, but hey, definitely a great show. But hey, we're here to continue talking about Panthers, even though it's the off season for the Cats. So end of season superlatives, and this is the time of year where still to really reevaluate everything from this Panthers team. And of course, we're from them being eliminated. We were really, we kind of are in the mode of acceptance now at this point with this team. Of course, the conference final, as of this recording, they have not begun yet. We're about just over 20 minutes from puck drop of game one between Oilers and Avalanche. But let's have some fun here, Jacob. Let's discuss some of the superlatives that we have for the Panthers. For everybody listening, I did send Jacob these categories for the superlatives for the Panthers, but we don't know each other's answers. So this is really going to be a very fun exercise for the both of us. So some of the answers might be the same, and some of them might be different. So let's have a discussion. And for everyone listening, and if you feel free to disagree, feel free to at us. If you think our answers are crazy, if you think they're right on the money, feel free to at us at Jacob Winans 8 and at Monoman 12 and at LO_FLA Panthers. So this one might be an easy one to start for the Panthers, and it's team MVP. And we'll alternate of who goes and for each category. Team MVP. I think this one is a very myself, and of course, Jonathan Huberdeau played a majority of the games, a 115-point season for the Cats, and was a player who really carried this team, especially when Alexander Barkov was out for over 10 games, and Jonathan Huberdeau really stepped up for the Panthers, taking the ball as he continues to be on this team. So my team MVP for the Cats is Jonathan Huberdeau.
Yeah, we're going to definitely agree on that one. Huberdeau had a breakout season, broke pretty much every record you could possibly break for point scoring. He was definitely the team MVP this year, but I would definitely say if Barkov had been healthy the entire time, I think he would have been team MVP. I'm still going to give Huberdeau the edge on that one.
For sure, and health is definitely a lot to do with that. And if Barkov was healthy, he definitely would have been in the running as well for the Hart. Let's also not forget team MVP, and of course for the Hart for the entire NAL. Next category is most improved player, and I'm going to give you the floor on this one first, on most improved player for the Panthers.
Most improved player. My pick is going to be Mason Marchment. I think he was fantastic this year. For a long time, was at a point per game pace. Injuries kind of derailed him at the very end. He didn't really get a chance to shine in the playoffs. But he was my most improved, and my honorable mention there was a splitting hairs between him and Anthony Duclair for that one.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because my honorable mention, it's weird. It's weird for this to be an honorable mention for me. This isn't my pick, but I was thinking an honorable mention as Sergei Bobrovsky based seasons, but it's really, when you think about most improved, you think about a person who hasn't really broken out in their career, and Sergei Bobrovsky has 2 Vezina trophies to his name, so it's really hard to put Sergei Bobrovsky in that category. At first, when I was writing, I was thinking Bob, but it's like, wait, I got to choose a better one. But Mason pick 10 points in his first season as a Panther, and then almost a point per game. But of course, like you said, injuries derailed him mostly for this season. Next category is biggest appointment, and my pick is actually someone who is actually not on the Panthers anymore. He was actually playing in the conference final. My pick is Frank Vatrano, and Frank Vatrano had a team for the Panthers, but of course, being scratched for 11 games and not being able to crack the lineup resulted in him getting dealt to the New York Rangers for a 4th-round pick, and then pick being traded to acquire Ben Sherratt at the trade deadline. Frank Vatrano is doing wonders for the New York Rangers. He's definitely why they are where they are in the conference finals, and of course, for the Rangers, Tyler Mott and Andrew Kopp are also part of that. And you can't name a better trade deadline this season than the New York Rangers. But as far as the Panthers' perspective, I'm going to say Frank Vatrano is my biggest disappointment for Panthers.
Yeah, I really do like your point there. I don't want to bash him too much because I feel like he was a guy who was just really in need of a change of scenery. Getting to New York, he got the minutes. He got put in the top 6. He had an opportunity to shine offensively. So I think it was more about fit than skill or talent for him. Definitely, I'm happy for him in New York right now. He's fitting in really well there and probably played himself into a nice contract. And of course, you got to remember his last game as a Panther, he did score a game-winning goal, 2 goals in that game against San Jose. So. I have to give him credit there. But my pick is also a guy who's no longer a Florida Panther, and my pick is Owen Tippett for most disappointing for the Panthers.
That's a good one.
Last year in the playoffs, he was on that line with Bennett and Huberdeau, and everyone kind of figured he was going to break out this season, become that top 6 right wing that the Panthers desperately needed. And by the time the trade deadline rolled around, top line right wing was a massive need in the Panthers lineup, and Owen Tippett did not step up and fill that role the way he was expected to. His development came along really slowly, and for me, he was the most disappointing player on the roster this year. Even got demoted to the AHL for a while, and at the time he was traded, he was playing for the Charlotte Checkers. So that's not what anyone anticipated from Owen Tippett this season, especially after his dominant preseason that he showed. So yeah, he's my pick for most disappointing, and hopefully he can get his career on track in Philly, getting the ice time that he needs and maybe more of the game experience to play a 200-foot game. So he's my pick.
Yeah, and the preseason that you were talking about for Owen Tippett, especially that game against the Dallas Stars, where Dallas was playing mostly their starters, while Panthers were playing most of their prospects in that game, and then Owen Tippett definitely shined as most of the younger players. So that there was some hope there for Owen Tippett at the time for him to really have a breakout season. Next one is player who you will lose sleep, who's under contract if they get dealt this offseason. I'll let you go first on this one.
So you said a player that I will lose sleep over?
You will lose sleep.
Okay. This is a tough one because we've heard some names floated around. We know that the cap crunch is on this summer. So my pick is going to be this is a tough one. I've got two in mind. I've got Anthony Duclair and I've got Brandon Montour. I'll make the case for both of them. As far as Duclair, he was disappointing in the playoffs. I understand that. I've heard a lot of people talking about his poor playoff performance 2 years in a row. I understand that, but he's also a 30-goal scorer, and he's also under contract for the next 2 years at $3 million per year. If we were to give him up, it would basically be a second instance of a Jonathan Marchessault situation. You just don't give away 30-goal scorers because of a poor showing in a small sample size in the playoffs. So for me, Anthony Duclair is a guy you got to keep around, and he will break out in the playoffs. It's just he doesn't have the experience. This was just his second time there. So he's one of my picks for that category. And then Brandon Montour is another one. I know he's a third-pair defenseman, but he does a lot more than just your average third-pair defenseman. And I really feel like for his cap hit in the current defenseman market right now, defensemen are very overpriced. And I think Brandon Montour has a reasonable cap hit, and he's a guy who can slide up and down the lineup. So those two are my picks for guys that I really would like to not see traded.
My pick is... I like your what you said about Anthony Duclair. Cap hit is very reasonable for the Panthers. It's very team friendly. 30-goal score for the Panthers, and definitely small sample size, like you said. So definitely not somebody that I wouldn't want the Florida Panthers to give up on. But they're trying to clear up as much money as possible. But you don't want to lose a whole bunch of productivity from your team, and this is why. If this player got dealt this offseason, you will see a not-so-happy Armando on Locked On Panthers. And this player is Sam Reinhart for me. I will be livid if he gets traded this offseason. You give up a first-round pick for Sam Reinhart and Devin Levi on the night of the draft, past midnight, when this deal was announced, at least for the Panthers. And for those keeping score at home, the pick for the Panthers that they will be sending to Buffalo is in, I believe it's pick number 28 for the Sabres, if I'm not mistaken. Pick 20. Yep, it's pick number 28 as of right now for the Sabres. So my pick is Sam Reinhart. 13 power play goals for Sam Reinhart this season, and the only Panthers had in the postseason came from Sam Reinhart in Game 3, and we talked about getting into the slot, about all those block shots and block passes that the Tampa Bay Lightning had. Look what happened when you got in the slot that one time on the power plays when they had so many opportunities. It was Sam Reinhart once again for the Panthers, and he's a guy who definitely gets on the doorstep. His cap hit is big for the Panthers, but that, in my opinion, I think that's worth keeping him around still for the amount of production you're getting. I mean, he's a former second overall pick for the Buffalo Sabres. So, I mean, that's the guy I would lose sleep over for sure.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you on that. Reinhardt's a really good pick there. He really revamped the power play a little bit. He brings a lot of what Hornquist brought last year, except he has a lot more skill to it. And just if you look at his point totals this year, he did hover around a point per game, and that was after his ice cold start to the season. So once he got comfortable, he really never slowed down beginning to end. Definitely disappointed a little in the playoffs, but it was his first time ever playing at that level. Obviously, you're not playing many playoff games, if any, in Buffalo. And he did not make it there with the Sabres at any point in his time in Buffalo. So I really think he's a guy who needs to grow with this core. And he was unstoppable once he got comfortable in the system. And again, talk about guys who can slide up and down the lineup. He played on every line from third through first and was productive in all three situations. So I think he's a guy you got to keep around.
Mm-hmm. Next one will be player you won't lose sleep over if they get dealt. My pick is Radko Gudas, and of course hits are nice and all, and he's definitely brings an intimidation factor. Sometimes watching Jacob Trouba with the New York Rangers, sometimes I think of Radko Gudas for the Panthers. For Radko, I see him sometimes get beat a little bit too much on his own end, despite the intimidation factor that it brings, and definitely the amount of times that sometimes I see Sergei Bobrovsky out to dry at times. So for player that I won't lose sleep over if they get pick is Radko Gudas. But hey, he does have 1 year left on his deal, and it's a pretty inexpensive deal for Radko. So that's a player that honestly I won't lose sleep over if.
Yeah, I was actually a little surprised at you answering with Gudas there. I feel like he's a big reason why the Panthers culture has changed under Bill Zito, but I do understand. I get where you're coming from. As far as production, he doesn't produce a lot. Gets pinned in his own zone from time to time, and yes, he definitely does go chasing hits a lot, and it can cause problems as far as giving up quality chances. So that's a good analysis there. My pick, I'm sure a ton of people out there are going to say Mackenzie Weegar. There's a lot of people that have been screaming for him to be traded. I'm not on that bandwagon. I think you keep Weegar around, and I
agree.
I think next season's going to be his best season as a Panther. So I'm not going to say Weegar. I'm going to disappoint a lot of people. My pick is going to be Patrick Hornquist.
Good one.
His cap hit is large. He's making, if I'm not mistaken, 5.3 or somewhere around there next year. It's between 5.1 and 5.3 for his cap hit.
5.3.
Exactly, yeah. This is not to say I don't want him as a Panther. As a matter of fact, I would love to do a little Brooks Orpik situation and maybe trade him to someone who could then buy him out, and then we just bring him back on the league minimum, the way the Capitals did with Brooks Orpik. I could really see that happening because I feel like he's an important part of the team. But for $5.3 million, you're talking about a fourth liner who's not healthy most of the time. He misses a ton of games. Just his style of play is not an everyday style of play. He's a guy who's going to be in and out of the lineup. And his production has trailed off as he's gotten older, and his foot speed is just not there anymore. So for $5.3 million, a team that needs cap space, I think Hornquist is the sacrificial lamb. But again, if we could somehow manage to Brooks Orpik his contract and bring him back on league minimum, I would be all for it. So yeah, he's my pick.
All comes down to the cap hit for wanting to move Hornquist. Of course, leadership for him is definitely worth it for this Panthers team. But of course, that cap hit, Panthers gotta find a way to create more space in order to sign some RFAs on their roster, and of course, maybe make a run at a certain player that they traded for, which we could discuss later in the show. But we're going to transition over to the next segment where we're going to continue our superlatives for the Florida Panthers in their season. But first, we're going to tell you all about Rock Auto. And with the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Wind are often pointless or seemingly intimidating. Questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to RockAuto.com at home and in your pocket. Save money, time, and money when using RockAuto. Why choose to spend up 30, 50, or even 100% more on the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you need, from brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today and find the solutions to all your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about it? They know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the per need. RockAuto.com. Second segment here on this June 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And before we continue, the Rest Network has an important favor to ask all of you. We put together a survey so we can learn more about our listeners like you and make your favorite Locked On podcast even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and don't like about Locked On Podcasts. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes the survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, go to lockedonpodcast.com/. So, Jacob, next category, the Panthers, is who is in prime position to take the biggest jump in 2022? I have a feeling we might have the same player on this one, but I'll allow you to go first on this one. Who is in prime position to take the biggest jump in 2022?
Yeah, so I know who you're gonna pick. So rather than agreeing with you, I'm gonna take an alternative route. I have a feeling your pick is gonna be 15. So I'm gonna go with two guys. I'm gonna go with Lucas Carlson on defense. I think he's in a good position to have an everyday role next season. I don't believe the money's gonna work out to keep Sherratt, and that puts Carlson back as the 6D. I think he showed a lot this season in limited minutes. I think if his role expands, he's going to have a really good season. But my number one pick for this is actually a guy who's not on the roster right now. I'm going to pick Grigory Denisenko. I think next season there's going to be some opportunity in the bottom six. There's going to be guys who are not here. I think Achari we could see leave. We're all anticipating Jumbo Joe will be out the door, and remains to be seen if Maxime Mammon's going to stick around, and like we just said, Hornquist could be on the way out as well. So I think that opens up an opportunity in the bottom six, and I think Grigory Denisenko is going to take that and step into the lineup. I think he's going to climb his way up the lineup throughout the season and maybe grow into a Frank Vetrano type role as early as next season. So my breakout player is going to be Grigory Denisenko coming back from injury.
Yeah, Grigory Denisenko, like you said, an injury-riddled season for the Charlotte Checkers. Only played a few games this season where the COVID game against the Los Angeles Kings, and struggled since moving over here. Lucas Carlson is an RFA this offseason, arbitration eligible for the Panthers, so he could find himself filling in another role unless another route. I can see Ben Sherratt walking for the Panthers. Looking back at that trade, maybe not the best trade that you make. I wasn't heavily impressed by Ben Sherratt. I know, though, of course, hindsight is 2020, and he played with Shea Weber in the Stanley Cup Final just last year. Maybe if you're Bill Zito, you maybe look back at that as it's a little bit of a head scratcher for as far as the trade for Ben Sherratt. But yes, you are correct. My pick is number 15, Anton Lundell. Of course, struggled with a few injuries this season, missed some time, but of course, I expect a big jump for Anton Lundell. I don't know whether his plans are to stay in South Florida. I think on his Instagram, he just got sponsored by Gatorade, if I'm not mistaken. I got to double check on that, but I saw something related to Gatorade on his Instagram. So definitely, if if he does stay around for the season, bulking up and then having an even better 2022-2023 season. And if he was healthy part of this season, he would definitely be in the race for the trophy for sure. For the NHL. So yeah, that was a little bit of an easy one for both of us. But all right.
Yeah, definitely. I want to add to your point there on Lundell, because I feel like you touched on it really well there. I think we call him Baby Barkov. That's kind of his nickname in Panthers media is Baby Barkov. And if his work ethic is anything like Barkov's, I would not be surprised to see him take on the second line center role as early as next season. That would not surprise me at all. I think he's got the potential to do that, but. An interesting comment from Zito after the season was that he said Lundell's going to get in the gym and he's going to get stronger. And I think that's the biggest part of his game right now that needs development. It's just his size. He's still a kid. He's got to get bigger and he's got to get stronger. And once he does that, he has every tool there. He's not going to miss as many games. And yeah, he's a guy who's ready to explode. But the one thing about Lundell that I'll add is his playoff performance was not good, and it led to him getting healthy scratched. That, to me, that's the motivation he's going to need. That's the thing that's gonna be in his mind over the summer. So I really do like your pick with Lundell there as your breakout player. I think next season, look for him to hit 60 points.
It's a growth opportunity for him, that's for sure. That's how I see it for Lundell. And you might have teased the future episode topic in when talking about Anton Lundell and predicting maybe what he might be next season. But we'll save that for a Fairbanks Friday, Adele, for the president of the Anton Lundell fan club, and we'll discuss that more with Nick when he comes on. Next one for is who is in position, and I hate using that for as far as not in, as I hate using the term position for the biggest fall because you don't want to see anyone take a fall for the Panthers. Who is in position to take the biggest fall? And my answer for me is Sam Bennett for the Panthers. I think he's if I had to choose one person to take the biggest fall, it's likely Sam Bennett. The home road splits are big and of course most of his production came in the beginning of the season for Sam Bennett. Of course, he laid it low on some of the hits towards the latter part of the season, didn't get in much trouble for the Panthers. Of course, he took a very big one in game 4. Yes, game 4 against Washington. And didn't result in a suspension for TJ Oshie. But hey, as far as the Panthers, I think the person, if you had to choose one person to take the biggest fall next season, I think it's Sam Bennett.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think Bennett is going to regress a little bit. Not even necessarily at his own fault, but I think Anton Lundell's growth is going to eat away at some of Sam Bennett's minutes. And also, as the season went on, we saw Bennett, who started the year on the top power play, relegated to the second power play. So naturally, his production is going to trail off a little bit. And you're right, he was red hot to start the season and was kind of average the rest of the way. I still think he's going to end up being a 20 goal scorer next year. I'd put him around 40 points, 20 goals, 20 assists. Not necessarily bad numbers at all, but I think he's eventually gonna slide into a third line center role, or he's gonna have to move to the wing as Lundell develops. But my pick for the biggest regression for next year, I'm gonna go Mason Marchment. I'm not sure if he's going to be here in Florida next season. We're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see how that plays out with his next contract. But I do not think he's going to maintain the near point per game numbers that he had this year. I love his game. I love Mason Marchment. I hope we can find a way to keep him. But I don't think he matches this production next season. I feel like it's going to be hard for him to do that, especially if we keep around a certain guy who ate up a lot of top 6 minutes the second half of the year. I don't think the opportunities are going to be there as much for for March.
I'm surprised you picked Marchment because I'm kind of under the assumption that he's gonna go. That he and when you think of Mason Marchment, the person, I want him to get the bag. I do want him. I want him to get that security for himself. So I'm surprised. I was really surprised that you picked Marchment on that one, assuming that he's here.
Yeah, personally, we talked about Vetrano and Tippett as players who are no longer here, but we still picked them. I'm not necessarily saying Marchment's going to be here next season. I think wherever he goes, I don't believe his production is going to match this year's production. I think
that's fair.
If someone spends big on him this offseason, they have to be really particular about the role they play him in, or else they may not get that return on investment. But again, that's not a knock on Marchment. That's just he played so well this season. It'd be very hard for him to match that again.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's all about the system that a player is in, and will he fit into the system wherever he goes, whether it's staying in Florida or going somewhere else. All right, free agent to prioritize for the Panthers. For me, you gave up a lot to get this player, and I know there's a cap crunch for the Panthers for them, but free agent to prioritize. Minus Claude Giroux. I think there's so much unfinished business for this Florida Panthers team, and I know they got to really try to really get to the negotiating table and say. And Bill Zito just has to tell Claude and his representatives, we have a chance. We fell short this year, but but not necessarily insult Ottawa. I mean, I don't know what those negotiations will look like, but that hey, they might not have the same as what the Panthers are right now, but I think you got to prioritize bringing back Claude Giroux. I don't know what the numbers are going to look like, but I think he is the one.
Yeah, for sure. I think Mason Marchment, I would love to see him back, but he's not a guy who you can ask to take a discount. He broke out, and it's time for him to secure the payday. I don't think you can ask him to take a discount. I think Claude Giroux, he's the guy you have to prioritize bringing back. I think at his age, his experience, I think he's a guy who will be a little bit more lenient on the price tag, and he's going to be someone who you can work with on fitting him in. But yeah, the sample size we saw with him, we saw Giroux get back to a point per game player. Who wouldn't want to play on Barkov's wing? I think if you can get Giroux for maybe a 2-year deal, fit him in with the other guys who are on contracts with similar term, I think he fits nicely in this particular cup window. And then if it doesn't work out, he's not too old where he doesn't have options after that. So I think if he wants another shot at the cup, he's got a couple years to do it here, and I think you have to prioritize bringing him back. And at that point, you have your top 6 and arguably your entire top 9 solidified for the next couple of seasons. So I think whatever it takes, you find a way to keep Giroux. We probably can't offer him the amount of money other teams can, but you can offer him a chance to win a championship that he hasn't gotten before. So I think he's the guy you have to focus in on this summer.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about past this year, as of right now, this is subject to change. $28 million in cap space 2 years from now, and you subtract that offer if you offer Huberdeau a $10 million a year for his cap hit, minus if you were to say 6 or 7 for Giroux. Past next year, you'll still have maybe over $10 million in cap space. Of course, you got to sign certain players to as well. But if you look that far into the future, it could work. It could work. I mean, Vegas has made their work of a lot of stress with wheeling and dealing, but they've made their situation at least as far as putting players on the ice work in a way as well. But we don't want to get too much into a cap crunch like Vegas is, because they got a big mess on their hands. But of course, I think Bill Zito looking at that, he won't let it get to that level for sure. All right, free agent to let walk. I'll let you go first on this one. Who is the free agent that you are willing to let walk?
We kind of touched on two of them already. Mason Marchment is a guy that I'm reluctantly going to let him walk, only because we can't match the offers he's going to get. The guy that I'm okay with letting go is Ben Sherratt. We gave up a ton to get him. The fit wasn't perfect. I think a lot of that wasn't necessarily his fault. I think a lot of it had to do with Ekblad's injury. They didn't really get the time to gel as a pair, and they were thrown together in the playoffs, and they hadn't had any game experience. So I think he and Ekblad could have been a really good pair, like a Sherratt-Weber type situation. It just didn't happen because of Ekblad's injury. So for me, it's Ben Sherratt. You let him go. You take the L in that trade. It's unfortunate. You lose Ty Smilanic and you lose a first-round pick, but it's what it is. Those are the chances you take when you're contending. So I think you just let him walk. He's going to get a good offer somewhere, but he doesn't really fit what the Panthers are doing going forward as far as the up-tempo, fast-paced style, puck-moving. He was more a playoff body, and I think when you need playoff physicality, we address that again next year at the trade deadline. So for me, Sherratt's the guy. You let him go.
I like that pick. That would have been my second in line had I not chosen the player that I chose. And this might surprise a lot of people. My pick is Noel Acciari. He's 30 years old now, and I actually looked at his cap friendly, the amount of times he's been on IR, the amount of times that he's been on IR. And I'm not gonna. And if I'm a coach, I'm not gonna ask Noel Acciari to change the way he plays, because the way Noel Acciari plays is defensively sound. Person who's not afraid to eat pucks, a person who's there on the penalty kill. But the best ability sometimes is availability, and sometimes Noel Acciari has had a little bit of a struggle, and this has been his not to his fault after what happened in the preseason game in Orlando, but this has been the season where he's been out the longest time and has had the worst of his injury luck this past season. But even prior to that, he's had quite a few stints on injured reserve. So it's not anything related to like his play specifically, but it's just more about availability for Noel Acciari.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Acciari is a guy. It's not necessarily anything he's done wrong. He fills his role and he does it well. My thing is, there's just no room for him anymore. He's a good center and that. Bottom six center, and at times early on when he was a Panther, he was up and down the lineup just because we didn't have the depth. But now, if you look at our centers, we've got Barkov, Bennett, Lindell, Luosterainen, who really developed this year. There's just nowhere to put Acciari unless he moves to the wing, and he's just not as effective as a wing. For me, Acciari, I think that's a really good pick, and he did his job for 3 years, but I think he's on his way to a new team definitely.
For sure, and those trips on injured reserve goes all the way back to when he started with the Boston Bruins. So it's been a little bit of something that has followed him throughout his career. Of course, we don't wish that on anybody, but definitely he's 30 years old now and signing a player to some over the age of 30, you got to be careful with those. That's for sure. We're starting to run out of time here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We had both our both segments based on superlatives for the Panthers, and those are our picks. Tell us whether you agree with them. At us at Mondoman12, at Jacob Winans 8 to tell us what you think about our picks, and tell us who your picks would be for some of these superlatives for the Panthers. In the next segment, we're going to discuss our conference final preview and our picks as the conference finals have just begun. It's a little bit past 8 o'clock here on Tuesday night. By the time this audio comes out, you guys will know the result of Game 1 between Edmonton and Colorado. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports development, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, Stanley Cup playoffs, fight, and even next season's NFL futures. Continue to source for all your sports wagering information from live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends. BetOnline, where the game starts. Third and final segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, Wednesday edition of the show. So conference finals are both set on the East. We have the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the New York Rangers in the East. That starts on Wednesday. The Colorado Avalanche versus the Edmonton Oilers. That starts on Tuesday night. Like we said, we're just after 8, so puck drop is just about to drop for the Western Conference Final Game 1. So it's funny, expectations, and some are expecting a very high-scoring Western Conference Final and a boring Eastern Conference Final. But who knows with these playoffs? We could see something very different. I mean, we expected more than 4 games in the Battle of Florida, and we expected more than 5 games in the Battle of Alberta, especially after Game 1 in the Battle of Alberta, after what happened there. But, Jacob, it's funny because I was just talking about this with the host of Locked On Oilers, Brett Holden, a sneak preview of Thursday's show, which will be a bandwagon series of the Florida Panthers podcast. We'll be bringing 3 out of the 4 remaining teams hosts on the show for tomorrow. You could guess which one I'm not bringing the 4. But we spoke about Mike Smith and how career-wise he's been great in the playoffs, despite not towards the latter part of his career. He has a career .930 save percentage in the postseason, 240 goals against average. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are taking this team by storm. Evander Kane has 12 goals. Former Florida Panther draft pick Zach Hyman has 8 goals for the Oilers. They're getting that secondary scoring that they didn't have last year after being swept by the Winnipeg Jets last season. Colorado finally gets out of the second round. They trade a first round pick for Darcy Kemper. They trade for Josh Mann's deadline, re-signed Gabriel Landeskog this past offseason, and Cale Makar maybe could win the Norris this year. He's a finalist along with Roman Josi. This is going to be a hard series to predict, but I think as far as depth for the Colorado Avalanche versus the Edmonton Oilers, Edmonton has been a great story this year, but I don't think they have the amount of depth that the Colorado Avalanche have, and this just looks destined for the Colorado Avalanche to finally make it back to the Stanley Cup final, and I think that the Colorado Avalanche are going to win this in 6.
Yeah, it's hard to bet against Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. They've been on another level this year. But for me, it's definitely Colorado getting through the second round finally. I don't see anyone stopping them. I think it's their cup to lose this year. Even without Sam Girard, I think they're deep enough defensively. Obviously, Girard is out for the rest of the way with a broken sternum. But I think defensively, they're still deep enough to win. And then offensively, it's not just the top line, the heavy hitters, and McKinnon, Landeskog, and Rantanen. They've got Kadri, who's been absolutely unbelievable this year. They've got a lot of depth as far as Arturi Lehkonen, who they got at the trade deadline. They have penalty killers like Helm and Cogliano. They've got Val Nichushkin, who has completely turned his career around since getting to Colorado. I just don't see any weaknesses on that team. And then you mix in some of their young talent like Newhook and they got Sturm from Minnesota, who's played nicely. So I think they're just too deep. There's no way they're going to lose this series. But McKinnon versus McDavid is going to be an absolute show for however long this series goes. But I've got Avalanche in 6 as well.
Yeah, and you were talking about Sam Girard. Man, what a horrible injury for him to go through. I've never broken my sternum, and that doesn't sound like something that I would want to experience. And of course, talk about Bowen Byram, who has dealt with his fair share of injuries throughout his career, as he's been able to still contribute to this Colorado Avalanche team. Of course, the expectations was to be a top pairing defenseman, but he's helping out the team. And of course, the trade on Taves, a lot of Islander fans are still really upset that Barry Trotz was let him go as well. So that's an honorable mention for the Colorado Avalanche as well. And of course, let's not forget that what Nazem Kadri dealt with the fans in St. Louis after that incident with Jordan Binnington as well. So let's not also forget that, and of course overcoming that as
He's a
definitely
motivated guy right now for sure. He's playing motivated hockey.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you saw that quote from Jordan Binnington about why he threw the wall, kind of comical, but
yeah, that was ridiculous.
Yeah.
We could go on a lot about that, but pretty ridiculous, kind of classless. But I'm definitely not defending some of Kadri's past, but that has nothing to do with what he's dealt with in the past round. So I'm definitely rooting for him the rest of the way. I think he's going to have a great rest of the playoffs, and I'm happy to see him overcome that from last round. Definitely, that was pretty rough to see. You don't like seeing that at all.
For sure. And all right, Eastern Conference Final: Tampa Bay Lightning versus the New York Rangers. The Tampa Bay Lightning got a whole bunch of rest. They played last Monday against the Panthers, and then their game one starts on this Wednesday. So we're thinking, my math is correct, 9 days off for the Lightning, while the New York Rangers and the Carolina Hurricanes went the distance. No road team won until Game 7, and the power play for the Carolina Hurricanes was kind of like the Panthers. They went cold. The New York Rangers converted on both their power plays early. Eagles not only a lot of saves, but he had two assists in their win against Carolina in Game 7. So Igor Shesterkin, Andre Vasilevsky. If you love goaltending, I compare a goaltending battle to like a pitcher's duel in baseball. If you like that kind of game, then this is the series for you. And Vasilevsky, and against the guy who's likely going to win the Vezina this year, and who was a candidate for the Hart Trophy this year, in Igor. And of course, the power play for New York has been great this season. Chris Kreider has broken out big time this season, and this is a rematch of the 2015 Eastern Conference Final for when the Tampa Bay Lightning advanced to the Stanley Cup Final before eventually losing to Chicago. And of course, Bedman Artemi Panarin, definitely showing why he's worth that contract in New York. Don't looking back at it with the Panthers, I don't know if for the cap crunch, how you were going to make it fit long term as far as the rest of the roster. So as far as the cap perspective, maybe better. It was best for the Panthers not to sign him to a long term deal. But for the Lightning, man, they are. We talked about it where this was a season for the Lightning where they were all about pacing themselves to get to the playoffs, and then they turn it on at the right time. I mean, they were down by 1 heading into the third period of Game 6 before coming back and winning, and then they win Game 7 on the road. They got their mojo going, and of course the Panthers unfortunately were on the receiving end of what happened, getting swept by the Tampa Bay Lightning. But I hate that I'm picking. I hate that I'm picking Lightning. I hate that I'm picking Lightning in this series. But if I take my Florida Panthers lenses off, and if I'm going to be objective about this, I think it's the Bolts that are going to defeat the New York Rangers, and I think that it's going to be Tampa Bay in 6. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's 5 for the Bolts to advance to the Stanley Cup Final.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Tampa is going to win this in 5, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Rangers are able to make it 6, just because they've shown an ability to come back a lot in this playoffs. I just think the top-end talent, Tampa has too much. I think the Rangers, they rely a lot on youth. They have that kid, the line known as the kid line, that has been really good this year in the playoffs. They've got Keandre Miller, who's a very young defenseman, eating up a lot of minutes for them. I think those guys are going to be a little bit overmatched by Tampa. Tampa's they're kind of a machine at this point. They get there, they know what they're doing, and everyone does their job. What's kind of pushed them over the top this year is the veteran production that I didn't think they would get as well as they have. I didn't think Corey Perry would still be as effective as he is. I didn't think Nick Paul would have as huge of an impact as he has had, and Brandon Hagel has been good too. I think they just have too much for New York. Shesterkin is going to keep them in it. They're going to be in every game, and their power play can produce. So they're going to be able to keep pace a little bit. But I just think at the end of the day, Tampa just has too much. And there are reports that Braden Point is expected to play at some point in this series. If he comes back at any point, the Rangers are in big trouble. I think Tampa is going back to the final. And I think Colorado is the only chance of ending a three-peat, to be honest.
And we've seen a player like Alexis Lafreniere who didn't really have the best first season for the New York Rangers, but he's definitely improving. I've seen some big defensive stops. One that Shesterkin was out of his net and he goes right to get his stick out of for the puck to not go into the goal. So I've seen a lot of great defensive plays from Alexis Lafreniere, and Capo Caco has been a player he was actually an RFA this offseason who, they're not the production that they want to see out of him in his first few seasons as well. So definitely for Lafreniere and Capo Caco, definitely those are players that if you want to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, those are going to have to be the players who really step up. Of course, because Zibanejad is gonna produce. I mean, he's been outstanding. I mean, every time they're on the road against Carolina, every time, because the Carolina had the last change, you always saw the Stahl line out there matching up against Zibanejad. But Zibanejad, who I think might be the future captain of the New York Rangers now that he's extended, definitely had a great postseason for the New York Rangers as well. And of course, Adam Fox, a Norris Trophy winner as well. He was definitely a big part of that Game 7 that got him over the top. And Jacob Trouba, we called him the New York Rangers version of Radko Gudas. A few hits that he had that might have really hurt a lot of players. I mean, Sidney Crosby. You're thinking about Seth Jarvis. I'm missing another one, but it was Seth Jarvis.
Max Domi was in there as well. He threw a big one on Max Domi, I remember.
Yeah, so there was quite a few hits. You're going to have to be very physical, and of course, the Tampa Bay Lightning brought that physicality against the Panthers in their matchup. So definitely, Jacob Trouba is definitely who's on the team for 4 more years after this year. So definitely a guy that is an intimidation factor for the New York Rangers as well. And they got to find a way to intimidate the Tampa Bay Lightning. But it's really hard to intimidate a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, of course. Barely anything is going to phase this team. And, of course, the ultimate X factor, Igor Shesterkin, if they want to find a way. He's got to be like godlike in order to find a way. But it's going to be a hill to climb. But, hey, that's what we hope, right? We're Panther fans, right?
Yeah, and Vetrano is on the Rangers, so I guess if you're looking for someone to cheer for, it's him. So.
And Gerard Gallant, let's not forget.
Gallant, gotta love Gallant.
He advanced to the Eastern Conference Final at the scene of the crime that he was let go back in 2016, and then he advanced. And the broadcast after Game 7 said mentioned that. I'm like, man, I was thinking that's right. It was at PNC Arena. I was like, man,
yep.
You just had to mention that.
Yeah.
So, but Jacob, I want to thank you for coming. Winans Wednesday edition once again of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. After this show, we're gonna enjoy some of the hockey, but in the meantime, tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Definitely, you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Winans 8, and you can keep up with my work at PantherParkway.com as usual.
Absolutely, and thank you so much, man, all joining.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Hockey and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark, who will be covering all the postseason activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On NHL. The Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. News and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available. You get podcasts. So I'm Armando Velez. with Jacob Winans. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, with your team every day.